So this is part 2 to my video about what to look for in a bike fitter. So it occurred to me as I was editing the first video that it would probably be a good idea for me to go through and talk about the different sort of types of bike fitters you're likely to find in your area, and give you some ways on how to judge them a little bit in a little bit more coherent way. Because you're going to find fitters with different levels of the 3 categories that we talked about in the last video, which were there'll be different levels of education, different levels of technology, and different levels of practice. And so this is going to be sort of a basic description of what you're likely to see out there. I came up with 7 different types, you might say, of fitters that you're likely to find out in the wild, you might say. But the first 2 we're going to dispense with pretty quick because they're kind of at the extremes. So the first one is going to be the fitter that has very low scores in all 3 categories. Very low education, low technology, and very little practice. And this is pretty easy, this is a pretty easy one to dispense with, as is the fitter that has high scores, very high scores in all 3. The person with the high scores, you could call them a master of their craft. And the low scores would be definitely in the beginner phase. It's pretty easy to tell that from the high scores, you're likely to get, very exceptional outcomes, and from the very low scores, you're going to get extremely poor outcomes from a bike fit from that person. But there's a lot of other categories to cover, and I'm going to try and cover them in order, roughly from least effective to more effective. So the first one I would put on the list is called the shiny nickel, you might call it. This is someone who has low scores in education and practice, but very high scores in technology. So this is most often seen in bike shops that purchase high-level technology, and they did so primarily because they heard that the bike fit and bike fit technology was a really good way to increase upsells and new bike sales. Sometimes the shop will have a dedicated fitter that they use, and occasionally this person has taken some of the basic education classes provided by some of the schools out there, which kind of allows them to do a very rudimentary kind of paint by numbers bike fit. This is the category that tends to be the most dangerous and often leads to some of the most dissatisfied customers. Don't get me wrong, the technology is great. I love it in my work. However, when it's in the wrong hands, it can go from being inconsequential at best to being downright dangerous at its worst. The next category we'll talk about, I kind of call the throwback. These are fitters that have low scores in technology and education, but higher scores in practice. They've been doing things for a while. So often this type of fitter relies on a very limited number of interventions because their skill set isn't very broad, and they also tend to see the same problems in most riders. They can have a tendency to become formulaic in their fitting, but because they've seen a lot, they can often take care of the greatest hits, you might say. They execute just fine within the quick bike shop bike fit realm. The next category I call the high-level shop fitter. This is someone with low scores in education, but high scores in technology and practice. This is where the shiny nickel fitters, those with low scores in education and practice, but high scores in technology, can aspire to get, but they rarely often make it to this level. Many of them just don't invest in themselves enough to really make the jump up here. Again, the more a bike fitter invests in their knowledge of the human body and how it moves, the more they're going to get, or the more they're going to learn from every subsequent bike fit they do from then on. The ones who do succeed in making it to this level do so generally because working so long with the technology, they begin to recognize all of the things that they know they don't understand, and are then motivated to try and solve these problems and learn more. And they often go out of their way to supplement their education by taking classes at a local college or by integrating with and working with relevant clinical practitioners. Okay, now this brings me to the next category, which is the casual clinician bike fitter. This is someone with high scores in education, but low scores in technology and practice. So even though I'm technically ranking this one above the high-level shop fitter, this type of fitter can definitely produce results far below that of a high-level shop fitter, especially if they don't perform fittings very often, or they might not even have enough relevant cycling or bike fit specific knowledge to really make an impact. In really bad cases, I've seen the fittings come from a casual clinician like this that are pretty much on par with that of a throwback bike fitter. Those are, again, the ones that have low education, low technology, and high scores in practice. Because I think sometimes the casual clinician can also fall into that same trap of formulaic thinking. The better ones in this category approach their bike fittings more just like a clinical evaluation. And so at the very least, the client leaves there with a better understanding of how they move and what types of functional issues that they have. Okay, next category is the PT bike fitter. This is someone with high scores in education, low scores in technology, but high scores in practice. They do a bunch of bike fits. With practice, the clinician can get a better understanding of the variability that's seen in human movement on a bike. There's also a better chance that this type of clinical bike fitter will have invested at least a little bit of money into some technology, perhaps only like a laser level system, or maybe one of the lower level infrared systems. But as the level of technology improves, so will the bike fitting. Technology does provide a huge opportunity for this type of clinical bike fitter to really expand their knowledge of how their clients are moving on their bikes. And so the fitter that doesn't expand their technology really is at risk of sort of falling back into that casual clinician category again. Okay, so those are the categories that I can come up with. This is not comprehensive. This is, there is a lot of gray area here. We don't really ever get these nice, distinct divisions. Each fitter is going to have varying degrees of their education, their technology, and the amount of practice they have. And so really there's a whole bunch of people that kind of fall in between, the cracks here, so to speak. And so skill sets will really vary. But these hopefully give you a little better idea of where things can go and what are the more common things you're going to see. But here are still kind of a few tips moving forward when you're looking for a bike fitter. First, I would definitely reinforce, don't overweight technology. Tech is cool. It's really shiny and it packs a lot of wow factor sometimes. But when it's unsupported by the other two means of measurement, then it really can sometimes be nothing more than smoke and mirrors. So you really have to be careful. Not all practice is the same. So really take a look into the background of your fitters and try and get an understanding of how long they've been doing it. And with what technology, how long have they had the technology? And this will go a long way towards helping you kind of get a better feel for them as a fitter and where their expertise is likely to stop. So taking into account those two things, I'd really recommend that you interview your bike fitter before scheduling a fit. Yes, it's good to use online reviews, but I find that just being able to spend a few minutes talking to the person, you can learn quite a lot from that. A really good, conscientious bike fitter should have no problem spending 5 minutes answering your questions. And if they do and they refuse to do that, then I would move on to the next person. So in addition to finding out what level of education they have, what technology they use, and how long they've been doing this, there's a few questions that I would also go into. Things like, what does their bike fit process include? Is there an off-the-bike assessment? Are there often exercises given after the fact to help you fit your bike better? Is there a follow-up that's included? What approach does the fitter have if they do find physical issues? And if they do an off-the-bike assessment, where did they learn how to do that? Or even something like, asking them on average, what amount of cost do most of their clients expect to pay in parts changes? That'll give you an idea of like how conservative they are with replacing pieces as part of their bike fits. So I'd like to appeal to everybody out there watching. Many of you, I'm sure, will have had bike fits, and maybe you've had a good experience or a bad experience. So based on that, what questions would you ask your next bike fitter before going to see them? That's something I think could be really helpful for many people out there. And as the good questions kind of come in, what I'm going to do is add them to the website article. So I'll put a link to that in the description below. But that's all I have for this one. Thanks everybody for hanging in there. Thanks as always for the support and the great comments that keep coming in. You can always reach out to me or go visit my website, which will be in the description below. And check out some of my other videos. And if you haven't subscribed, I'd appreciate it. Thanks everybody.